Your brain right now is changing its shape. Not metaphorically, not someday. Literally, right now. And if you've been living with chronic anxiety, the brain you have today is physically different from the one you had a year ago. Certain regions have grown denser, others have actually shrunk. Pathways that used to be quiet are now superhighways. Anxiety doesn't just feel like it's taking over your mind. It's rewiring it, cell by cell. And the strangest part? Once you understand how it's doing this, you can start to undo it. Welcome back to Mind Fact Depth, where we go deep into the science of the brain, the body, and the universe that runs them both. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through exactly what anxiety does to the human brain, not in vague psychological terms, but at the level of neurons, neurotransmitters, and physical brain structure. We'll explore how a small almond-shaped region hijacks your decision-making, why anxious brains literally lose gray matter in certain areas, how your memory gets distorted without you noticing, and what scientists discovered about reversing the damage, something that sounded impossible just 20 years ago. If you've ever wondered why anxiety feels so impossible to just think your way out of, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why, and what actually works instead. Let's begin. Deep in the center of your brain sits a structure about the size of an almond, called the amygdala. Its job is simple. It's your threat detector. It scans the world for danger faster than your conscious mind can even register what's happening. In a healthy brain, the amygdala fires, alerts the rest of the system, and then quiets down once the threat passes. But in an anxious brain, something different happens. Chronic anxiety causes the amygdala to physically enlarge and become hyperactive. Brain scans show that people with generalized anxiety disorder have amygdalae that fire more intensely, more often, and at things that aren't actually dangerous. A coworker's tone of voice, an unread message, a small ache in the chest. Think of it like a smoke detector that's been recalibrated to scream at burnt toast, as if the whole house is on fire. But the deeper layer most people miss is this. The amygdala doesn't just react faster, it starts predicting threats. It begins generating fear before anything happens. That's why anxious people often describe a feeling of dread with no source. The alarm is ringing in an empty room. And here's where it gets worse. Because while the amygdala is growing louder, another part of your brain is going quiet. Right behind your forehead sits the prefrontal cortex, the rational, problem-solving, planning part of your brain. It's the wise adult in the room. It's also the part that's supposed to calm the amygdala down and say, hey, that's just burnt toast, relax. But under chronic anxiety, the prefrontal cortex actually loses volume. Studies using MRI scans have found measurable gray matter reduction in the medial prefrontal cortex of people with long-term anxiety disorders. In simple terms, the part of your brain that calms you down gets weaker. The part that panics gets stronger. And the communication between them, the neural highway that's supposed to let logic talk fear off the ledge, begins to break down. Here's the layer almost no one talks about. This isn't a character flaw. It's not weakness, it's neurology. When someone says, just calm down or just think rationally, they're asking you to use a tool that anxiety has been actively dismantling. It's like asking someone to run a marathon on a broken leg and wondering why willpower isn't enough. So if the rational brain is shrinking and the fear center is expanding, what happens to your memories of what's actually safe? That's where things get really strange. The hippocampus is the seahorse-shaped region responsible for forming and storing memories, and crucially, for telling your brain the difference between past and present. It's what allows you to remember a scary event without feeling like it's happening to you again. In chronically anxious brains, the hippocampus also shrinks. And when it shrinks, two things happen. First, memories become less precise. Anxious people often misremember neutral events as negative. Second, the brain loses its ability to contextualize fear, so a memory from 5 years ago can feel like it's unfolding right now, in your body, in this exact moment. The deeper truth here is that anxiety isn't just changing how you feel in the present. It's quietly editing your past. It's painting old memories in darker colors, making your life story feel more threatening than it actually was. People with chronic anxiety often describe feeling like they've always been this way. But that's partly an illusion, created by a hippocampus that's been reshaped to retrieve fearful memories more easily than neutral ones. And once your past starts to feel threatening, your nervous system begins responding to your life itself as if it's the danger. Which brings us to what anxiety does to your body's chemistry. Every time the amygdala fires, your body releases cortisol, the primary stress hormone. In short bursts, cortisol is actually helpful. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, helps you respond to real threats. But when anxiety keeps the alarm running constantly, cortisol stops being a useful signal and becomes a slow, corrosive flood. Chronically elevated cortisol damages neurons in the hippocampus, accelerating the shrinkage we just talked about. It disrupts sleep, it weakens the immune system, it increases inflammation throughout the brain, and critically, it interferes with the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically fertilizer for new brain cells. So less BDNF means fewer new neurons. Fewer new neurons means less mental flexibility. Less flexibility means anxious thought patterns get stuck, looping endlessly because the brain can't grow its way out of them. Here's the deeper layer. This is why anxiety so often spirals into depression. They share the same biochemical soil. Roughly 60% of people with anxiety disorders will eventually experience clinical depression. Not because they're giving up, but because the same hormonal flood that fuels anxiety eventually burns out the systems that generate joy. But there's one more thing anxiety does to your brain, and it might be the most insidious of all. Inside your brain is a network called the default mode network, the DMN. It's the system that activates when you're not focused on a task, when you're daydreaming, when you're in the shower, when you're trying to fall asleep. In a healthy brain, the DMN wanders, it plays, it creates. In an anxious brain, the DMN gets stuck. It loops obsessively on the self, replaying conversations, rehearsing future disasters, scanning for what could go wrong. Neuroscientists call this rumination, and brain scans show that anxious DMNs have abnormally strong, repetitive activity patterns. Here's the part that should genuinely shake you. The more your DMN loops, the more it strengthens those loops. Every time you replay a worry, you're literally myelinating that neural pathway, making it faster, easier, and more automatic to think that exact thought again tomorrow. Anxiety, in a very real sense, practices itself on you. Every spiral is a rehearsal for the next one. But if anxiety can rewire your brain through repetition, that means something else has to be true. Something that for decades, scientists insisted was impossible. For most of the 20th century, neuroscientists believed the adult brain was fixed. Whatever damage anxiety did was permanent. You were stuck with the wiring you had. We now know that was completely wrong. The human brain remains neuroplastic for your entire life. And the same mechanism that lets anxiety reshape it, repetition, attention, emotional intensity, can be used in reverse. Studies on mindfulness meditation have shown measurable shrinkage of the amygdala after just 8 weeks of consistent practice. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been shown to thicken the prefrontal cortex. Regular aerobic exercise increases BDNF, regrowing neurons in the hippocampus that cortisol had destroyed. In other words, the brain that anxiety built can be unbuilt. The same biological machinery that trapped you contains the exact tools to set you free. Your amygdala can shrink, your prefrontal cortex can strengthen,